In this video, I'm going to teach you something about ThinkorSwim that will change your life. Within the ThinkorSwim active trading software, you can create strategies that will automatically place buy and sell signals on your chart according to whichever conditions you tell it to. In this video, I will teach you about these strategies. We're going to create one together, and then I'll also teach you how to read the data that is provided by these strategies. While I'm on a chart, if I come into studies and edit studies, you all have seen this screen before. This is where you turn on your indicators, simple moving average, RSI, MACD, etc., etc. But you may have never even noticed or clicked onto this strategies subtab, and from here you will get a large list of already created strategies. All these ones with locks on their little scrolls to the left here exist within ThinkorSwim natively, and you can turn these on. This one's called Halloween. That's a funny name. I have no idea what that is. Let's turn it on. Let's hit apply, and you can see now this strategy showcasing buy and sell signals on your chart. And you can come into it and you can click on this little cog here to try to get an idea of what this is doing. We'll talk about this code in a second. So if it looks like Chinese to you right now, that's okay. It looks like this one is literally buying in October and selling at the end of the month, which is an interesting strategy. Okay. But if you wanted to see the P&L of this strategy, hey, how is this strategy performing? Now back on my studies subtab, I'm going to type in floating P&L. If I turn on this study, I will see now, of course, the P&L of the strategy. And for some reason, it looks like buying in October and selling in May is a profitable strategy. Of course, this is the S&P 500, so just about any strategy that's bullish is profitable, but here is the P&L of this strategy. Buying 100 contracts at a time on the daily chart all the way back until 1993, this strategy is up $29,000. Now, I just mentioned buying 100 contracts. That is represented by this little number underneath of your buy signals. That's how many shares you're entering. If that's not the position size that you would like to simulate, you can come back in to your edit studies modal, and there is a global strategy settings button in the lower left here. If I open this, I can change my default trade size for entry orders. So right now we're up $29,000 on 100 contracts each trade. If I want to lower this down to 50 contracts each trade, I am of course now up $14,600, and you will notice that there is now 50 underneath each of our buy conditions. Maybe the most popular trading strategy of all time is a moving average crossover strategy. I've got two simple moving averages plotted on my chart, the 50 length being the cyan colored line and the 200 length being the salmon colored line. Say I want a strategy that enters when the 50 crosses above the 200 and exits then when the 50 crosses back below that 200 simple length moving average. So I'm going to hop back into my edit studies modal, and I'm going to ensure that I click on the strategies subtab before I press this create button. If you just hit the create button right away while the studies subtab is selected, you will make a new study or indicator. We don't want to do that. We want a strategy. We want something that will actually simulate our orders, right? So under the strategy subtab, hit create. You'll now notice we are creating a new strategy. Right away, you will notice a default line of code with add order. This is an action function that will actually showcase your trades, your entrances, and exits onto your chart. But first, we have to let the machine know what we would like those orders to be, right? We have to pull in simple moving averages, and we have to perform the calculation of the simple moving average crossover. Once we've done that, then we can plug that in to this add order function so that the trades will be plotted onto the chart. So we want to, of course, call in two simple moving averages with a length of 50 and a length of 200. Luckily for us, any study that exists within ThinkorSwim can simply be called into your code. You don't have to recreate it, perform the calculation. You can simply call that function into your code. What I'm going to do is cancel out of our new code, and I'm going to look into the settings cog of one of these simple moving averages. First off, the simple moving AVG here, this gives you the name of the function. So the function name that we will need to call is simple moving AVG. Then once again, back into the cog. This is the list of parameters that function accepts. Think of it this way. A function is just a math equation. 2 plus 2. That is the math equation. The parameters are the values of that function that can be changed, the values of that equation that can be changed. So this length being 50 is one of those values that can be changed. Instead of 2 plus 2, you can make it 2 plus 1 by changing one of the values, changing one of the parameters inside of the calculation, inside of the function. So once again, we now know the name of the function itself and the list of parameters that it accepts. In this instance, price, length, displace, and show breakout signals. So now back inside of our custom strategy, I'm going to give myself a couple of lines here, and we're going to go ahead and call these simple moving average functions into our code so that we can use them in our add order by function to be properly plotted on our chart. What we need to do with these study functions is we need to store them inside of variables. Variables are simply something that you can choose the name of that acts as a storage container for values. What we need to do in order for the machine to understand that, hey, this is one of those storage containers, this is one of those variables, is we need to declare them. There are 3 different keywords you can use for declaration. DEF, which stands for define, input, and plot. Any of those 3 keywords, and we will use all of them in this example, so you don't have to grasp all this right now. Any of those 3 keywords will then let the machine know, hey, whatever the user is about to type after this is going to be a variable. For us right now, with our simple moving averages, I'm going to use the keyword plot. If it's not obvious enough, this keyword means that whatever value that I initialize this variable with, that I assign to this storage container, will be plotted onto the chart. So directly from within the strategy itself, we can plot our moving averages so that we don't have to turn them on separately. I'm going to plot it whatever I want to call this. Let's just call the first one SMA fast, and let's go ahead and set this equal to, once again, we now know the name of the function, simple moving AVG. Remember, that is the name of the study, therefore it's the name of the function. Whenever you call a function, you must open and close parentheses. That, once again, is how the machine knows you are attempting to call a function here. And whenever you are done typing in a line of code, you end it with a semicolon. Great. We can now plot a simple moving average. The only issue is that we haven't changed any of the parameters. Every study function, so every study out of the box, comes with a default set of parameters. If I were to add a new simple moving average, you can see it immediately comes out with close, 9, 0, and no. That is the default parameter selection for a simple moving average. So if I were to not enter anything inside of these parentheses, that's the simple moving average I would get plotted. I would be plotted a 9 length simple moving average. We don't want that. We want, for our fast SMA, a 50 length simple moving average. So I'm going to type the name of the parameter, which of course we know to be length. I'm going to set that equal to obviously whichever value I would like. In this instance, set it equal to 50. If I hit apply on this now, let's actually turn off our simple moving averages. If I hit apply, you will see on the chart a 50 simple length moving average being plotted once again, just from our strategy, not because I have an SMA study turned on. Of course, we also want a 200 length simple moving average plotted on our chart. So I'm going to declare my variable with the keyword plot. Let's go ahead and of course and name this one SMA slow. Now, variable names are completely customizable. You can name this whatever you want. I can name it Scooby-Doo if I wanted to, as long as I set it equal to the simple moving average study function and then set that length parameter equal to 200 and end my line of code with a semicolon. Once I hit apply, the 200 simple length moving average will also now be plotted on my chart. For readability's sake, I am going to go ahead and name it SMA slow, but I could call it Scooby-Doo if I wanted to. Next up, we need to perform the calculations. We want to enter when our SMA fast crosses above our SMA slow, and we want to sell when our SMA fast crosses below our SMA slow. So I'm simply going to give myself a couple of lines here just to increase readability of the code. And I'm going to declare two new variables that store these calculation values so that I can call them into our add order action function down here. I'm going to declare these variables with the keyword DEF. This simply means that you're declaring a variable to be stored locally within this code. It's not going to be plotted. Nothing else is going to happen with it. DEF is simply defining the variable so that it can be called later inside of the code you are declaring it within. So let's go ahead and define our first as bull cross. And this is going to be equal to when the SMA fast crosses above SMA slow. End our line of code with a semicolon. So I was just talking about how we can call this variable later in the code. Now I just gave an example of doing that. We defined the variables SMA fast as the 50 SMA and SMA slow as the 200 SMA. Now we are calling those variables later in the code within our calculation. And we're using the keyword crosses above here. You can also use crosses below. You could also just say less than, greater than, or equal to. Those are all your available operators. In this case, we of course want crosses above for our bull cross at least, and our bear cross function is going to be declared once again with the keyword DEF. Our bear cross variable, sorry, not function, our bear cross variable is going to be when the SMA fast crosses below SMA slow. End our line of code with the semicolon. So we now have given our code. We've told the machine all the building blocks we need to build this strategy. We have called in and plotted on our charts two simple moving averages, one with a length of 50, one with a length of 200. Then we have defined variables with where our bull cross is and where our bear cross is. All we need to do now is build up our action function so that these plots are properly signaled on our chart with the buys and sells on our, of course, our bull and bear crosses. Action functions are slightly more complicated than study functions because we cannot, as we did with the simple moving average, simply add the function to our chart to learn what the name and the list of parameters of that function are. Luckily for us, ThinkorSwim has a whole free learning center with every single function available. So we can look up our add order function, of course, get the name of the function here and an entire list of the parameters that this function accepts. So from that parameter list, I now know our first parameter is of order type. This is utilizing dot notation order type dot by auto because these constants are only stored within the order type dataset. There are a certain subsets of constants within ThinkorSwim that aren't natively stored in ThinkorSwim, so you must utilize this dot notation so that the machine knows where to look when you type in something like by auto. The machine looks in the order type dataset for by auto, which of course exists in there so it doesn't throw the error. If I were to delete order type, you would get the error. Anyway, hopping back into our list here, we can see defines order side and position effect using the order type constants. Guess what? Luckily for us, there's a whole other list of order types in here. So instead of buy auto, because buy auto will literally just, hey, anytime it's true, go buy more shares. I want to simply buy to open. I want to buy only when it is to open a position. So now using the ThinkorSwim Learning Center, looking up the syntax, once again, you don't have to have that dot notation thing memorized. If you use the Learning Center, the syntax will tell you it has to be order type dot buy to open, right? I just wanted to explain dot notation to you so that you knew what was going on, but you don't have to memorize that. Use the Learning Center. It will tell you how to call everything into your code, right? So hopping back into our code, I'm going to change our order type to buy to underscore open. By the way, this capitalization, really any capitalization of keywords in ThinkorSwim doesn't matter. Capitalize it how you want to. It will still work as expected. Our second parameter of the add order function is condition. This is where we get to tell the action function when we want to buy to open our trades. Of course, remember, we have already done this calculation. We have already defined this condition and stored it within the bool cross variable. So this is where we get to simply call in the bool cross condition. Now, whenever the SMA fast crosses above the SMA slow, which of course are variables that we have already declared and plotted on our charts, happens, a trade will be bought to open. Notice how this all flows downhill, right? You kind of build the building blocks top down, plot the simple moving averages, perform the calculations, call the calculations into the add order action function. If I were to hit apply on this now, you will see the first time this happens, the first time there is a cross of the 50 and 200 simple moving average, the strategy is entering the trade. Now, of course, we have to set up our sell. Right now, it literally just entered and then did nothing else because we haven't added our sell condition yet, right? So hopping back into the code, let's do another add order function. Let's give this one a order type of sell to close. This, of course, being sell to exit your trades. And let's call in our bear cross variable. As I hit apply now, you will see we are buying when you get that 50 crossing above, selling when you get that 50 crossing back below. Before we move on to look at the P&L of this strategy and talk about how we can utilize this code to further optimize and perfect this strategy, I want to touch on a couple of things. Notice how when calling in multiple parameters inside this function, they are separated by a comma. That's how the machine knows, hey, the next thing this person types in is the next parameter. Also notice how I didn't have to type the name of the parameters for this add order function. When we wanted to set the parameter of length on our simple moving average function, we had to type in length equals. We don't have to do that here inside of this add order function because we are putting the functions in the order the machine expects. If I hop back into the ThinkorSwim Learning Center for add order, the first parameter is type, the second is condition. The machine reads function parameters in the order they are listed. If you are listing them in that order, then you don't need to explicitly type the name of the parameter. If I open simple moving average again, you will notice that the first parameter is not length, it's price. So if I didn't type length equals here, it would be using the price of 50 as this simple length moving average, as that's the first parameter it expects, right? Since we obviously don't want that, we want the length of 50, we have to type in the parameter there. Okay, let's move on to the real fun stuff now. Let's go ahead once again and turn on our floating P&L study, and let's look at the profit and loss of this strategy. So on the SPY max available daily chart, trading, remember, 50 contracts every trade, or 50 shares each trade. As we change that setting during the beginning of this video, the strategy is up $24,000. Now, a fantastic thing with ThinkorSwim is that your strategies don't need to be set specifically for tickers or timeframes. If I change this to Apple, it automatically adjusts, of course, the entrances, the exits, and the P&L, up $7,600. NVIDIA, up over $6,000. Also, if I were to jump into the 15-minute instead of the daily, it would auto adjust. If I were to jump into the 1 hour, it would auto adjust. The 1 minute, it would auto adjust. You don't have to customize your codes for tickers or timeframes. ThinkorSwim auto adjust all of that for you, which is very nice. Let's actually move back into that NVIDIA 5-minute chart that I clicked into. This thing was looking, maybe it was the 1 minute chart. Yeah, the NVIDIA 1 minute chart that I was just looking at. This doesn't look very good. Hey, this is losing money. Well, my initial thesis for maybe why this isn't working so well is that on a much smaller time frame, on a 1 minute versus a 1 day, we probably want to be utilizing shorter SMAs, right? Maybe I want to use the 9 and the 20 instead. I could simply come in and change my lengths to 9 and 20, hit apply. Okay, maybe this isn't working as well, but look at how easily I can go through and I can test different variables. Let's try 50 and 100 instead. Let's see how this looks. Okay, this looks a little bit better. Imagine having to go through and grab all of this data manually. Then when you wanted to test and optimize, you wanted to change your SMA lengths like that, you'd have to once again go back through, grab all that data manually. With code, you can just auto type in a few keystrokes, run it, and automatically gather all that data. This saves you hundreds of hours of time. And even with that, having to jump into your code and change these variables is a little annoying. I'm about to set up a way to do that even easier as well. So we actually followed a bad coding practice when we initialized our simple moving average values here. It's not good coding practice to hard code in values into your function calls. It's better to define these values at the top of your code so that they can be easily called throughout the rest of your code. Of course, in this instance, we're only using each value once, so it's not that big of a deal, but if you start writing much more complex codes and you need to call these variables multiple times in multiple different calculations, it becomes a lot easier for readability and maintainability if the values are defined at the top of the code instead. So let's go ahead and do that, and especially within ThinkorSwim is this very powerful because ThinkorSwim has a declaration keyword of input. If I declare something as an input, you will be able to much more easily change this value, and I'll show you how in just a second. The first input I'm just going to call fast, and we're going to initialize this with a value of 50 in this line of code. With our next input, I'm going to name it slow, and we'll give it a value of 150, I guess is what we're going with right now, either way. Now, instead of hard calling 50 and 150 in my values of my length parameters, I will instead call in the length of fast and the length of slow. Once again, we declared variables, initialized them with values. Now we are calling in those variables later in our code inside of these parameters. This is a better coding practice. Also, as I hit apply and OK here, since I called those or declared those, variables as inputs. Now, if I click on the settings cog of my strategy, those inputs are listed here and can easily be changed directly from here. So instead of 50 and 150, I can change it to 100 and 200. As I hit apply, you will see the plots change. You notice the P&L change. I can come back in. We can try something else. Let's do something crazy like 9 and 20 instead. You'll see the plots change. You'll see all the trades change. You'll see the P&L change. And when you do this, when you change the value from the input screen like this, it does not change your source code, which is really nice. It will remain at 9 and 20 as long as you have this indicator turned on your chart. But if I were to remove this indicator from my chart, then go grab it again, it will be reset to 50 and 150 because the source code itself isn't changing. You'll notice if you zoom in and look closely at your orders on this strategy that the SMA cross happens on this candle, right? But the trade doesn't enter until the open of the next candle. Don't ask me why, but that's the default value of the price parameter for when the add order should be executed. Luckily, since this is a parameter, we can hop back into our code and we can change this. So once again, separate your parameters with commas. And since this is the third parameter in the list, and we are continuing to list them in order, we don't have to type in the name of the parameter equals. We can simply type in the value we'd like it to be set at, which is the close of the current candle. And I'm going to set that true for both the entrance and the exit. I don't want to be buying the open of tomorrow. I want to be buying the close of today. I can look at the chart at closing bell and see whether or not the SMAs crossed, and if they did, enter. So you'll still see that the code is showing on the next bar. That's just a limitation of ThinkorSwim. It's how ThinkorSwim works. It shows its codes on the bars after the condition are true. But if you notice, this little arrow here is now at the close of the previous bar. And that little sideways arrow denotes the price you actually got in at. Here, if I make it look even a little bit crazier, just so you can see a better example. If I set this to the close of 2 bars ago, rather than just the close of today's bar, you'll notice that arrow is now based off of this price, right? So just because the code is still showing on the next bar, since we have it set to close, the value is actually entering and, of course, exiting at the close of the bar where the conditions are returning true. Here, you notice the sell arrow, the little sideways arrow, is at the close of this bar. You may have looked ahead a little bit on the add order parameter list and seen that the next parameter is trade size. And this is a very powerful parameter where we can begin to do some more customization of the number of shares we enter other than just that global strategy settings that we changed at the beginning of this video. So the most popular way to trade, especially on strategies like this, where there's not necessarily a set stop loss, it depends on when the SMA crosses below the other SMA, right, is to trade with a standard selected dollar amount. So say I wanted to enter $10,000 positions on each trade that I took. What I'm going to do, remember, good coding practice, we don't hard code values into variables. So I'm going to put at the top of my code another input declaration for a variable I'm going to name position size, and I'm going to initialize this variable with a value of 10,000. Now remember, the next parameter on the add order list was trade size. So I can comma to separate my parameters, and I can simply then here do the calculation of position size divided by close. That will mean you enter however many shares, 10,000 divided by whatever the current candle is closing at. That is how many shares you will enter. So if I set this equal to position size divided by close, and we also set our sell to position size divided by close, as I now hit apply, you will notice the P&L change, of course, and you'll notice now when SPY is trading around the upper to low 390s, you are buying 25 shares. When SPY is trading up near the 450, 460s, we are entering 21 shares. When SPY in way back here, when SPY in 2003 was trading at $95, we entered 105 shares. So you see now how you are entering on each position $10,000 worth rather than just the standard from whatever you set within your global strategy settings. The final parameters in our add order action function are arrow color, tick color, and name. This is just look and feel parameters so that you can make your buys and sells stand out so they're not all just purple and saying the name of the strategy. So if we hop back into our code, let's go ahead and make our orders look a little bit better. Now, I cannot just type in a color here. This first parameter that I'm going to do is the one of, is it tick or arrow? This is tick color first. I want my ticks and my arrows on my buys to be green. But you'll notice if I type in green, I get an error because green is a constant that is stored within the color data type. It doesn't exist native within ThinkorSwim. You have to let the machine know that it needs to look inside of the color data type in order to find this stored value of green. What do we need to do this? We talked about it a little bit earlier. We need to utilize dot notation. So it needs to be color dot green. Doing this is how we get our tick color to be green. I'll do color dot green again for our arrow color parameter. And then our last parameter is name. We're going to type in a string here. Whenever you are using a string, or in other words, in more plain English, whenever you're typing in a word as something that you would like to show up in your code, something you would like to display in your code, you need to put quotation marks around it. So quotation mark by quotation mark. Then, of course, for our cell, let's do color.red as our tick, color.red as our arrow, and cell quotations as our name. As we hit apply, you should notice buy and sell just looks a lot cleaner that way, right? If you've watched 33 minutes into this video, you are obviously interested in codified trading within ThinkorSwim. I have over 55 coded strategies, indicators, scanners, and watch list columns, all published and available on my website, daytradingstrategies.net. Link in the description down below. It is a monthly fee when you sign up, as I am always adding and updating new codes to this site. But first off, I promise you it's cheaper than anything else you'll find out there for this number of codes you get access to. And of course, you can cancel at any time under the My Account tab. So click the link in the description down below, sign up today, and become a better trader.